You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense books. I am your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 180. In this episode of the podcast, we'll be meeting Craig Martelle, who is an international best-selling author who writes in several different genres, but is probably best known for his science fiction books. But he also writes the Ian Bragg thrillers, and the fourth book in that series, A Fatal Brag, was published on November 26. But before we get to the interview with Craig, you'll hear us talking about the 20 Books conference that Craig puts together every year down in Las Vegas. I've attended 3 of those conferences, and I'm planning to be there next year. And so I highly recommend you check it out. And to attend, if you can work that out, it's a great conference. You can go to 20booksvegas.com for all the details. Registration will be open on January 8th, 2022 for the conference that will be held in November of that year. Tickets have sold out in the past, especially now, I think, with everyone being eager to venture out after a year plus of lockdowns. So you can go over to 20booksvegas.com for the details and check that out. But anyway, just wanted to give you the heads up on that. It's a great conference. And if you do go, let me know and we'll chat in Vegas. All right, here is my interview with Craig Martelle. Hey, everybody, this is Alan with Meet the Thriller Author, and I'm really excited to have on the podcast today Craig Martelle. Welcome to the podcast, Craig.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Alan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks so much for coming on here. And well, before we get into the nitty-gritty of talking about books and all that good stuff, can you tell us a little bit about your background before you became an author?
Oh, holy cow. That's a lot of years. I didn't become an author until I was in my 50s. I enlisted in the Marine Corps and spent an entire Marine Corps career, 21 years, in the intelligence community as a Russian linguist when I was enlisted. And then when I got my commission as an officer, I served in all the intelligence disciplines. And then when I got out, the Marines always say about what do I need to do? What am I going to do when I grow up? So after I retired, I went and got a law degree and then went into business consulting and leadership coaching. So I did that for about 7 years. I was working on the North Slope of Alaska, which is inside the Arctic Circle. And I was gone over half the month. And the temperatures are just brutally extreme up there because it's 500 miles from the North Pole. So I looked at it and was like, I'm just not going to do this anymore. I'm getting too old for this. So I retired. I lit myself on fire. Trying to clean up my yard. So I decided that I couldn't do that kind of stuff either. And I needed to just write that book I always wanted to write. And I started writing, and that was 2015. And I haven't stopped since.
Wow. So you, even before when you were in the Marine Corps and everything, you're all in the back of your mind, you're always dreaming about writing a book, or it was just a goal that you had?
Always stories. One thing that in the intelligence community, in order to analyze, you have to ask a lot of what ifs. What if it's this? What if it's that? What if they have this capability that we don't see? And if we don't see it, then how can we look to find it? What assets can we task? And all of that comes together. And it's just, novel fodder, constant novel fodder just inundates you over 20 years. And plus, some of the funniest things I've ever seen were in high stress situations in the Marine Corps. So I've got enough of those for a lifetime worth of stories too.
And what was the first book that you wrote and published?
The first book was it was called "It's Not Enough to Just Exist," which was a post-apocalyptic survivalist book, and that was a good book to get my feet wet in regards to writing, because I live here in Alaska, and survivalist is kind of one thing you have to do. You have to have that mentality. So in case you lose power for a month or something like that, do you have enough to eat? Can you survive? What's it going to take? So while I was preparing for that kind of mindset and approach to living here in Alaska, and I live in the interior, so it's kind of conditions are kind of harsh. Yeah, live in the interior of Alaska, complaining about the harsh conditions of the North Slope, as it was like minus 30 Fahrenheit last week. But I digress. And that book, it didn't sell really well, except it was a good story, and a traditional publishing house picked it up. So my very first book I ever wrote turned into a 4-book series called End Times Alaska. and that one did really really well for them, because they had to retitle it, they edited it, and put new covers on it, and then it sold really well after that. The third book I ever wrote, and I wrote all these in a matter of like 4 months. Third book I ever wrote was People Raged and the Sky Was on Fire. That one was a thriller based that talked about the intelligence community and the dysfunction within Washington, D.C., and cross-agency cooperations. So I wrote that thriller, and right now on my screen, right behind my super cool phone, I've got the sequel to that book that I wrote 5 years ago.
Oh, so are you still planning on putting that out eventually, or?
Oh, I'll have it done by the end of this month. I've got it on pre-order for March, and I'll probably early that up to maybe the first week in February.
Yeah, I think that's so cool, because I remember, I'm familiar with your background, obviously, but like your first book, I believe you said it took you a little bit longer, and then you got better and better, and until you got kind of down to like a science. Can you tell us a little bit about that process for you?
Oh, you bet. When I worked as a business consultant, we did process improvement. And so I saw writing as a process, getting the cover, doing the editing, writing, and production. How do we maximize our production? How do we make sure that all the stars are in alignment each day to generate the words and tell the story? How do we make sure the story flows? And I saw that as a production line in my mind. So I put it together that way, and I'd finish one book, shoot it to the editor, and then immediately start the next book. And when I finished the book, shooting it to the editor, the first time I tried to get an editor, they were like, okay, I have an opening in 3 months. I'm like, yeah, but the book's done now. They said, I have an opening in 3 months. So I didn't like that at all, but I liked the editor. So I said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you on retainer and pay you a set amount each on the first of each month. And then when I give you a book, you edit it, you move it to the front or whatever else you're doing, edit it and shoot it back. And that arrangement worked great for like 3 years. And then now, since I'm doing more pre-orders and stuff like that, I don't need that turnaround within a week. There I was doing no pre-orders. I was publishing a book a month. And as soon as they were done, get them edited, get it through the proofread team, and then publish it. And from when I typed the end, it was about 1 week until it was published. So maintaining that torrid pace, but I wasn't doing anything else besides writing. I was writing like 12 hours a day. So there's no excuse not to be able to maintain that kind of pace. And then I got involved with 20 books to 50K, Michael Anderle, and decided that sometimes you have enough money, and I had enough. My author earnings are simply a barometer of how I'm doing. So of course I want to sell more and more books, but still my calling seemed to be more philanthropy for authors and helping other authors find their best way up the mountain that they determine for their success.
Yeah, you do so much for the indie author community. The 20 books to 50K group. What is that now? Like 55,000 plus, I believe, members.
Yeah, it's over 55,000. But
that's crazy.
The good thing is, because of our conferences, and I started those just because I got mad at a different conference that was overpriced and underserved. So we started our own conferences, and now it's not just indies. We have a huge number of traditionally published authors who are contemplating doing indie publishing, as well as just happy with being traditionally published, but want to establish a relationship with other authors who are doing similar things. So it's not just indies anymore. It's all authors, and that is going really, really well. We have a great community. And at the conference, a success, we had David Weber come to the show. And he does have a few indie published titles, but he's mostly traditionally published.
Yeah, that's a great conference. I've been to three of them. I missed one because it was my wife's 50th birthday in 2018, so I decided I better sit that one out. But
good call.
Yeah, wonderful conferences. I was there in the one in November. It was so nice after the pandemic. It's the first big outing that I've had since the pandemic started.
I think that was most people. It was time to get out.
Yeah.
It was, no matter what, it was time to go.
Yeah. And I was curious about that. Do you have an experience putting these together? Because you're like, it's one of the best writing conferences out there, in my opinion. Did you have experience putting shows like these together before?
I had done a few shows for when I was in the historical miniature gaming community. I had done a few shows, and plus I had done a few Marine Corps balls. So there's a lot of overlap in preparing for a large event, whether it's a meal and a series of presentations or a bunch of games that people need to sign up for. So it all worked out to help me best understand what we needed to do to manage the project that is 20 books to 50K, 20 books Vegas, as well as all the other events we hold around the world. Like next year, 20 books Madrid. We'll be in Madrid, Spain in June.
And what's your favorite part of being involved with the group and putting on these conferences in Las Vegas and Madrid and everywhere?
Changing lives. When people say you changed my life, I was able to leave my crappy job. I was divorced and had nothing, and now I'm able to provide for myself. There's so many of those stories. It's really heartwarming, and that's why we do what we do, to help people realize a better life for themselves, even if they love their full-time job, but that little bit extra they can earn from their writing, as well as give them a plan for when they retire. Because most people don't know what they're going to do after they retire. Oh, I'm just going to sit on the beach. Yeah, that gets old after about 2 days. So what else are you going to do? And people find that they can write and tell stories. And I'm sure you've heard some kind of statistics like 1 out of every 100 authors make it and make any money at this gig, and most only don't even make enough to cover the costs. But I think because of groups like 20 books to 50K and the support structure we have a greater percentage of successful authors in our group than other groups, because we're not in it to take money from them. We're in it to help them make more money for themselves.
Yeah, so I say, because your conference, I mean, the pricing is like, compared to the other conferences, is like very, very cheap, and you don't take sponsorships. Nope. I mean, it's just incredible how you put everything together like that, and to help the writers out there.
Oh, well, thank you. And this last year, we had over 100 scholarships. We had over 100 people come to the show on somebody else's dime.
Yeah, it really is a great community, and I like to too that it helps take the stigma out of, because I think a lot of people with writers are like, oh, business advertising bad, but you guys kind of take the stigma out of that and say that it's necessary. Even if you're traditionally published, you still have to, unless you have a big advance or something, you're gonna have to do a lot of the work yourself.
That's right. You need to market no matter what, and if you're smart enough to write a book, you're smart enough to do all the other stuff. There's no mysteries there. You don't have to sacrifice goats at midnight on the solstice. It's just some basic steps that you have to take, and you can do it anonymously, like from behind your computer. You don't have to get up in front of the world wearing a sandwich board that says "Buy my book." That's bad marketing, and we don't encourage that.
So you've had a lot of success in several different genres. You're probably best known for your sci-fi books. But your Ian Bragg thrillers are out now. Really great thrillers. A lot of action. Were you always a fan of thrillers as a reader? What prompted you to give the Ian Bragg series a go?
I love Tom Clancy. I love his books. Back in the 70s, or I'm sorry, back in the 80s, when I was a watch officer looking at Soviet naval, Pacific Naval Fleet ship movements, I read Hunt for Red October, and I'm like, oh my God, we have top secret clearances and all this stuff. Here it is. They're saying the names, they're saying the code words. Oh my God. And just the way he wrote the book, the way he put it together, with the multiple tendrils of simultaneous actions, and then winding it together, like braiding it until it comes to a conclusion. I love that approach. So I read the Tom Clancy books, of course, some Patterson books. Right now I'm reading something by Robert Dugoni, all excellent authors telling great stories. That and my experience with the government, I'm like, I could do all this stuff. I know this stuff without having to try to dig into the Senate archives and congressional testimony, which is one thing that Clancy had to do, was dig into congressional testimony and find those where they slipped and said a code word, or where they discussed a program that wasn't necessarily public, but was on public record. So it was a shortcut. And I think it allowed me to write a compelling book with the first Rick Bannock. And now the second one, I have to do a little more research because I'm talking about things that I didn't do, which is energy infrastructure.
And now so Fatal Brag is the latest one that's came out November 26th. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
That one was the sequel to the first three. I wrote the first three fairly quickly, one after the other, in order to establish that series. And it was always my intent that those three would be like the prequel, the background. And then that book 4, A Fatal Brag, would be a standalone that would then launch the series and the separate books. So that one hit, and it has done very, very well. The premise behind that one is how they get contracts, because I always wanted them to have government contracts, but be a wet work contractor, not associated with the CIA or anything else, doing work that the government needed done, but the shortcuts made it easy. So we put Ian Bragg on the job. And then also, since I already had Rick Bannock and the time periods overlapped, I'm like, let's do a crossover. So Rick Bannock does appear in A Fatal Brag. So both those series will be mutually supporting without having to read either one before the other.
I'm quite curious about your writing process too now, especially when you're like blending these two different worlds in your books. Do you outline your books, or do you write by the seat of your pants? What's your process like?
I outline it in my head. I generally write the first chapter and the last chapter, and then fill everything else out in between.
Oh, cool! That's a good strategy to have. So you know where it's the start and the big and the end, and then you like flush it out.
Yeah, if you know where it's going to end, and then also the word count. That's how many side plots I keep active, just all depending on the word count that I'm looking for.
And are you writing like multiple projects in different genres at the same time, or do you like have to focus like one and then go to the other series? Or
sometimes if I get stuck writing, because you don't have writer's block if you have a production schedule like I have. So sometimes the words don't flow as well on one thing as they do on something else. So I will switch to a second series that, like the next book after I finish Rick Bannock 2, I'll jump into that one and start making notes and highlight some interactions, some scenes, might even write a scene or two. And that helps break it free. So when I go back to my main work, I focus primarily on one. But if I run into any problems, then I'll dive into another, get those words, and that gets me way ahead for when I do start that next book.
I'm always curious about what my guests use to write their books. To use Word, Scrivener, or something else?
I write in Word.
Okay.
Old military. I mean, I grew up with Word and Microsoft products from. I used Word Star when I had MS-DOS 3.1, but as soon as we had Windows and Word came out, I've been using Word ever since.
Yeah, I remember Word Star, the blue screen.
The floppy
disk.
Blast for the
past. Yeah, that's a blast from the past. And you have so many irons in the fire with everything you do. I'm just kind of curious what a writing day looks like for you. I mean, do you have like set hours? Do you have word count goals that you try to meet every day?
I do have word count goals. Right now, the word count goal is 3,000. Let me plug into my spreadsheet today's numbers, and let's see what we've got. So yeah, I track my words every single day. Let's see. It's 1:15 for me, and I have 1,700 words today. I'm averaging 2,300 words a day is all on this story, and I need to get that up to about 2,500. My target is 3,000. So I need to jam some extra words today as soon as we get off. But I do a lot of other things. I publish books. I have my own publishing company. So marketing. I have I had 2 books published this week. I had one published Monday and one published Tuesday. So maintaining marketing activity on those and plussing up, encouraging readers to leave reviews, those kinds of engagements. 20 books to 50K. I do a 5-minute focus every day, like a training video, a professionalism kind of engagement there. And I ordered a cover for a story next year, as well as 3 other covers for a series that I am contemplating writing for next year. So all of this every day, this is every day I have those things. Future books, past books that I'm pushing now, current book that I'm working on, and other things, relations, especially when it comes to 20 books of 50K. Sometimes it's nice being me. Other times it's busy because the head of Blackstone Publishing, Blackstone Audio, contacted me this morning looking to have a conversation about what they can do for 20 Books Vegas next year. And I have the same kind of messages from Podium, from Tantor, from Dreamscape, and Audible. I'm thinking Amazon will break free their travel ban, and they'll be in place next year. So the benefit is I get to talk to all of these people, the heads of all these organizations who support authors and indie authors. And sometimes I get good deals. Like I think Podium is looking to pick up one or two of my series, and that'll be nice. Get them made into audio without me having to pay up front. Ian Bragg, I own those in entirety. I hired the narrator. I get the audio done, and it's consistent, as well as the German translations. I have Ian Bragg translated into German too.
Oh, how's that going with the German market? Obviously, I hear a lot about that in the conference, that it's such a hot market. What's been your experience so far with that?
It is, the sales are good. I think the sales are every bit as comparable with the United States, but my thrillers aren't as thrilling as Germans are used to. So initially I got bad reviews. People are like, this is boring. This is dull. I fell asleep. It's like, what the hell? This is a good book. But yeah. It's the market. You have to work with the market. So I shifted all the marketing to action adventure instead of thriller, even though the series is Ian Bragg Thrillers. I can't do anything about that. Not now anyway. But I targeted action adventure, and the reviews all came up, the sales came up, and it was a better fit for that market.
Oh, that's fascinating. So just like a little tweak, basically, and you can kind of change the flow of things. That's fascinating.
Well, one thing I accept, because I have a great insider team for readers of varying demographics as well as nationalities and genders, just to make sure I cover all my bases. And they make sure that I don't put out anything that's not a good book. So I know the books are good. I just need to target the right readers for the particular books. And once I started targeting action adventure with Ian Bragg, it's doing better. It was doing fine before, but it was getting bad reviews, and I didn't like that.
Yeah, so since you've published books in several different genres and subgenres, do you think that in the end, I mean, the story is really was the most important, right? I mean, you need to have a good, be writing in a popular genre and all that, of course, but the story really is what trumps everything. And I like how you always say that when you post on the groups and stuff.
Yeah, the characters will drive the plot forward. So the plot, when you're writing a book, your CGI and your special effects are not going to be able to carry the day. And you look at something like Star Wars that had the cutting edge special effects, but it was still a hero's journey, and people fell in love with the characters, and the characters move those stories forward. And even though the special effects are dated, the character acting wasn't as great as it could have been because everybody was young. Still, the story holds solid. Star Wars, now number 4. Back then it was number 1. So Star Wars is a great example of the characters. The characters drove that plot forward, even though they also had cutting edge CGI. And nowadays you see a lot of movies with even better CGI and special effects, but their characters aren't relatable and they aren't moving the plot forward.
Yeah, there has been something where they've spent, I don't know how many hundreds of millions on CGI effects, but the story wasn't good, and so this movie flopped.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And one movie, I saw it was on yesterday, and as soon as it came up, I'm like, oh, I don't like this version. Midway, the modern version, it's a bunch of disjointed battles, and they weren't even using good tactics, but the CGI was incredible. It looked like you're right in the middle of the battle. But the movie itself was just so bad because there was no story, there was no character you could relate to that you wanted to follow throughout. So sorry, Midway. I like the original version because those characters you could embrace.
Yeah, I remember the one from the 60s. I didn't realize they'd put another one out.
Yeah, you're not missing anything, man.
Okay, that's good to know. We've touched about it, how productive you are. You're such a prolific author. And for listeners who are writers or aspiring writers and trying to get better at it, I'm always trying to improve the way I write. What advice do you have for the people who are listening, who are trying to get better at this?
Keep writing. Don't rewrite the same thing over and over. Write a book and you'll look at it, you'll keep going through it and you'll say, this isn't great. Give it out. Give it out to people, sell it, put it out for sale. And then as people start giving you feedback, embrace those folks and see if any of them, because if somebody says, hey, it's a great story, but you lost me here, you lost me there, embrace that person because they're doing you a favor. And then say, hey, would you like to read my next book at no cost? Here, I'll just give it to you at 30,000 words and let me know what you think about the story. And you'll start getting great feedback. And that's how you build your insider team. And the only way you can do that is by writing continuous new stuff. If you're rewriting the same book and say, hey, can you read this again? See how the fix, they're going to get bored with you and stop giving you feedback, especially if you don't always accept their input. And sometimes their input is good and other times it's not. So keep giving them new books and say, this is great. I appreciate this, and incorporate what will keep your new readers reading. You don't want to ever give a reader a reason to stop reading. So if it slows down or if it becomes tired or if a side plot isn't working, cut it out, fix it, and keep moving forward.
I'm kind of curious too now with this year and a half that we've had with the pandemic. Did that change your writing process at all? Your publishing pace at all?
No, I wrote like 6 more books last year than I had planned. It didn't really change anything for me. Keep in mind where I live. I live in the center of Alaska. I have almost no contact with humanity as it is. So not being able to have contact with humanity when I don't already, all it did was save me a lot of travel and saved a lot of money on travel and allowed me to produce extra books. So last year was a huge year for me from a financial perspective.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures you've posted of the Northern Lights, like right from your driveway, right? It was just amazing.
Yep. Yeah. We live outside the city. We live about 10 miles outside Fairbanks. So we don't have any light pollution. And when you have a clear sky, sometimes you get great shows.
And so curious to now, so the 2020, the 2021 conference is over. Do you start right away now, working already for next year, or do you get a little break at all?
I started last year. You have to reserve a hotel and get things moving. You have to start at least 2 years early.
Wow.
So 2023 and 2024, we've already locked in the dates. I haven't signed the contracts yet, but I was assured that we have our dates that we asked for. No, I've already started. I already have everything set up for 2022. The registration on January 8th, but I already have everything in place. 100% of what we need is in place. And I have a full-time employee for next year for nothing but 20 Books Vegas to take some of the pressure off me as we come down the home stretch.
Yeah, that is good, because I remember the first one, you were basically almost doing everything on your own. That first year, that was kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was all me, and that was tough. But we only had 400 people.
Yeah, how many attended? How many ended up attending this year?
We had just under 1,400 show up. We had 1,750 registered. And not too bad. We didn't have too many people bail out at the last minute.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, I highly recommend aspiring writers to check it out, and even the readers, because you had the signing event, which was awesome. I didn't have a table, but I went to check it out, and really great. The setup and the people that were there. So
on November 18th, we'll have an author signing event again.
Wow, yeah, because that was amazing. The people really went all out with their tables and their setup. So yeah, it was pretty amazing to see that. Pretty cool.
And it will be next year as well.
We talked a little bit about advice in writing, but what other advice would you have for aspiring writers out there who are trying to get their act together?
Finish it. Finish the book. If you start one, don't have a shiny object syndrome and have a bunch of half-finished books. You have to finish a book to understand the entire process.
And what's your what's next for you and for Ian Bragg?
I hate to admit it, but I do not have an idea for Ian Bragg 5. I hope that comes to me over the next 6 months, but I'll probably publish an Ian Bragg book either in the summer or in the fall next year. So it'll be a while in between the books. But that's where I need to work on my marketing, get that first book, get those first 4 into more people's hands.
Do you find a lot of difference between writing, like when you're writing a space opera or sci-fi versus a thriller? Is it like a different mindset for you, or is it the process is the same?
The process is pretty much the same. It's all about the characters and the character interactions. Once you have the character in mind and their mannerisms and their foibles, then you can put that to action to solve a problem. It's all about conflict and resolution. Keep the plot moving forward with conflict resolution in each scene. And the conflict doesn't have to be a fight. It could be anything where there's an engagement.
All right. And so for the listeners, the great place to learn more about you and find more about your books would be at your website, craigmartelle.com.
It is craigmartelle.com.
Yeah. And I highly recommend also for the listeners that are aspiring writers or not aspiring, even if you've published, is to check out your nonfiction books, because those are fantastic for those books that you put out for indie authors.
Oh, you bet. Successful indie author series.
Do you enjoy writing the nonfiction? Is it really different from writing fiction?
Oh, no, I put those books together to save myself time. I got an awful lot of questions, and I found myself answering the same questions over and over. So I wrote the books to help answer those questions. Pricing strategies, release strategies, how to become a successful indie author, write compelling fiction. And then the final one is collaborations.
Oh, yeah, because you do a lot of collaborations, and I've never done that before. Is that something is it harder to do, or is it you already have the system down? Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
I have fired over 50 collaborators. So it's a very challenging process to get right and make sure that you have the right collaborator, the person who's writing with you, who helps make you better and helps the process be better. And they could still be a new author, but their engagement and the way they approach writing is what matters most. So getting there, having a good plot, having good characters, and a synergy. So yes, I collaborate a fair bit, but very, very selective. You can't solicit and say, "Hey, I want to collaborate with you." That's not how it works.
In anthologies too, you put a lot of great anthologies out there, and I know that you go through a very rigorous process to be able to join one of your anthologies. Are those fun to put together? Do you have an anthologies planned coming up here?
I actually don't. I might do the Expanding Universe anthology, science fiction, and that would be the 8th one in that series. They're difficult. They're time consuming to put together, but the reward of who gets in, I think, is worth it, because we all get to work together to market, promote, read each other's work. And I think people get a better look at the wider industry than just writing and marketing their own stuff.
All right, Craig. Well, yeah, you're a lot of irons in the fire. I'm very, very impressed. I get tired just listening to your schedule.
Oh, thanks. It's not one for normal people or healthy. Don't do what I do.
All right, Craig. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Alan. I really appreciate being on your show.
Thank you for listening to Meet the Thriller Author. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with one of your favorite writers of mysteries and thrillers. Or if this episode's guest is new to you, I hope you give their books a chance. Helping listeners discover new authors and books is one of the coolest outcomes of doing this podcast. As always, you can head over to thrillerauthors.com to sign up to my Thrilling Reads email list. That way you won't miss out on any great deals in thriller and mystery books. You can also check out all the links and resources in the show notes for this episode over at thrillerauthors.com. And also, please do subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already, and leave a rating and review wherever it is that you're listening to this show. If you have done that already, I thank you. I really do appreciate your support. For my other links to my author website, social media haunts, and more, check out thrillingreads.com/links. All my links will be on that page. So that's it for this episode. See you next time, and stay safe out there.